we've just passed the 26-minute mark in the count. T-minus 25 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Still proceeding very satisfactorily. We're still aiming for the start of our window on this, the first flight to land men on the moon.
The Apollo 11 mission will blast off using 7.5 million pounds of thrust generated by the Saturn V launch vehicle. At 360 feet, the rocket stands taller than the Statue of Liberty, with 15 million individual parts, 92 engines, and 15 miles of wiring. The bill for landing a man on the moon is to cost almost $23 billion, covering the input of 20,000 companies and 400,000 workers, all now focused on a sunny morning on the 16th of July, 1969.
The astronauts, the prime crew, were awakened at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight as planned in their countdown and proceeded to have a physical examination in which they were declared flight ready. They sat down for the normal astronaut fare on launch day. As far as breakfast is concerned, orange juice, steak, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee.
Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins were all three superior men, technically. They were all three very good flyers. Neil Armstrong was a very quiet individual and didn't speak much on the ground and didn't speak much in flight. Buzz Aldrin, on the other hand, was willing to talk and did talk and talked all the way there and back. Collins was sort of in between there. He was a very serious person, had a tough job to do, and he knew that. But they were all three outstanding human beings and outstanding engineers.
Well, every launch day is a time of excitement, enthusiasm, and apprehension. But I think in most circumstances, you always feel that the chances of actually lifting off are fairly distant or remote. And you have to temper your enthusiasm with the realization that, in fact, you may be coming back in and trying to go another day.
I don't think any of us slept too well. You just have too many thoughts going through your mind. There's an emotional buildup that's associated with anticipating the sequence of events leading up to launch. And all of us were just hoping as intensely as possible that it wouldn't be called off.
The astronauts departed from their crew quarters after checking out their suits. They departed from the crew quarters at 6:27 a.m. and some 27 minutes later, 8 miles away from the crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center, atop the launch pad at Complex 39, 6:54 a.m., the commander, astronaut Neil Armstrong, was the first to board the spacecraft. He was followed about 5 minutes later by Mike Collins, and finally Buzz Aldrin, the man who's sitting in the middle seat during liftoff, was the third astronaut to come aboard.
CDR, STC, how do you read? STC, loud and clear. Good morning, Neil. Good morning. Welcome aboard.
We are continuing, and we're continuing very excellently at this time. There are no problems that have been reported in as the countdown continues to click down.
The Apollo 11 mission owed its existence to years of intense rivalry between the American and Russian space programs. This was to become the space race. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 1, the world's first successful satellite. A month later, Sputnik 2 followed. Laika the dog became the first living astronaut in space. The Americans chose monkeys to test pilot their flights. Both countries were using animals to see if it was possible for man to survive conditions in space. In 1961, the Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man to orbit the Earth, the most significant in a series of space firsts achieved by the USSR. Their triumph was a humiliation for the United States.
These are extraordinary times, and we face an extraordinary challenge. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Most of us in this Apollo program were very strong patriotically. I think we did respond to the challenge that President Kennedy posed. So we had many failures and many losses that we had to contend with, but that didn't deter us.
Finally, in 1962, America found its first space hero in John Glenn. His trip into space may only have been a repeat of Gagarin's successful orbit a year earlier, but national prestige was restored. In 1965, the Russians upped the stakes when Alexei Leonov made the first ever spacewalk. 3 months later, the American Edward White responded with his own walk. 4 years later, Apollo 11 was ready for liftoff.
This is Kennedy Launch Control. The countdown still proceeding very satisfactorily at this time. The weather is certainly go. It's a beautiful morning for a launch to the moon. We expect a temperature of about 85 degrees in the Kennedy Space Center area. The wind's about 10 knots rather, from the southeast. And the weather conditions and the round-the-world track, according to reports from the Manned Spaceflight Meteorology Group, indicate all weather conditions are acceptable for launch.
Just the three of us in there, talking quietly, waiting expectantly for time to march on, situations and countdowns and procedures to unfold, hopefully in an uneventful way, so that we get to the countdown, lift off, and everything will be fine.
All elements still go in the countdown at this time. The hard worker in the spacecraft at this point in the countdown, astronaut Buzz Aldrin in the middle seat. He's been working with the spacecraft test conductor on setting up proper switch settings in preparation for pressurizing their reaction control system. These are these big thrusters on the side of the service module. There's actually 16 of them in 4 quadrants around the service module. They are used for maneuvers in space. We pressurize that system before liftoff. That particular operation will be coming up in some 5 minutes or so. In preparation for it, Buzz Aldrin, who has most of the switches in front of him, has been preparing for that particular event.
The media are also preparing for the event. They will report on what is to become the greatest media event of the 20th century. Like the assassination of President Kennedy 6 years earlier, everyone will remember where they are and what they are doing today.
It was customary at that time that we always had the media descended on Clear Lake. NBC or somebody had a studio there on one of the hotels across from the center. The public affairs building was wall to wall with little cubicles or whatever you call them where they could use a phone, and we knew there was lots of folks over there.
2,000 journalists from all over the world flocking to Kennedy Space Center, housed in a grandstand 3 miles from where the rocket stands. They'll send live radio and television reports to every continent on the globe. 1,000 million people will watch the launch live on television.
I mean, we were accustomed, I guess, to being in a control center. There's a camera in there that runs around and looks at you, and you know you have to be careful if you scratch yourself or something like that.
2 minor problems have been encountered during the count. Early in the count, a malfunction light came on here in the control center, indicating that we might have a communication problem at the launch pad. The problem turned out to be very minor. A simple adjustment of some equipment beneath the pad remedied the problem. There was in fact, no equipment problem involved.
Before the flight, you generate a list of things that call mission rules, where you think about possibilities and you think about actions that you need to take, and you decide what you really need to continue the mission.
The second problem, we did encounter a leaky valve in part of the equipment that's used to replenish the hydrogen fuel supply on the 3rd stage of the Saturn V launch vehicle.
To go into lunar orbit, you have to have certain hardware in proper working order, particularly the fuel cells, for example, that provide the power. And if you lose a fuel cell, our rule, you couldn't go into lunar orbit, you couldn't land.
Once we get the commit signal, the signal that says that the thrust is proper and acceptable, we then will get a commit and liftoff as the hold-down arms release the vehicle. We have some 7.6 million pounds of thrust pushing the vehicle upward, a vehicle that weighs close to 6.5 million pounds.
The Saturn V is made up of 3 stages, each containing thousands of pounds of fuel. The first stage launches the rocket but burns for only 2.5 minutes. The second stage provides enough power to boost the astronauts into Earth orbit. Then the third stage propels the Apollo Command Module Columbia towards the moon. Once one stage has used up its fuel supply, it ejects from the rocket and the next stage takes over.
Some final checks of the destruct system aboard the 3 stages of the Saturn V launch vehicle. In the event during powered flight that the vehicle strayed rather violently off course, the range safety officer could take action to destroy the vehicle.
With any rocket launch, the early stages of rocket ignition could result in a collision with the tower. That's the most dangerous part of the mission. Once the rocket is free of the tower, then it can be moving in certain directions in an unusual way, and there's still a little bit of time to wonder what to do. But if there's a collision with the tower, then there's going to be an explosion right away and a need for a very quick reaction to be able to use the launch escape tower, hopefully to get free of the big fireball.
The launch vehicle people keeping an eye on the status of the various propellants aboard the Saturn V launch vehicle. Just at liftoff, we will have a vehicle weighing close to 6.5 million pounds on the launch pad. There's more than 1 million gallons of propellants aboard the 3 stages of the Saturn V.
It is a very dangerous time. You've seen pictures of these things coming up off the pad and blowing up, and we had confidence in our escape system. But irrespective of that, you were always nervous.
The countdown continues in part 2 with the launch of the Apollo 11 exactly as we would have seen it 30 years ago.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're now coming up on the 10-minute mark, 10 minutes away from our planned liftoff. Mark, T-minus 10 minutes and counting, T-minus 10. We're aiming for our planned liftoff at 32 minutes past the hour.
So now it's the 10 minutes of launch. Yes, that's very exciting, very apprehensive, very risky. You had to be ready to go pretty much on time. You only had a launch window of several hours. If you're going to rendezvous with the moon and have the right sun angle when you got there.
A short while ago, spacecraft test conductor Skip Chauvin asked Neil Armstrong if the crew was comfortable up there. And Neil reported back, he said, we're very comfortable, it's very nice this morning.
There's never a break. There's always a concern because something can go wrong at any time. And it's not like we're frustrated because we can't chew our fingernails. We're watching things happen in a smooth, cool fashion. You need to be that alert so that you're able to respond.
Then in about 30 seconds, that big swing arm that has been attached to the spacecraft up to now will be moved back to a park position some 5 feet away from the spacecraft. The swing arm now coming back from the spacecraft. Countdown proceeding satisfactorily. We've completed our telemetry checks with the launch vehicle, and at this point, with the swing arm back, we arm the pyrotechnics so that escape tower atop the astronauts, atop their spacecraft, could be used if a catastrophic condition was going to occur under them with the launch vehicle from this point on down in the countdown.
A countdown has many parts, particularly as widespread as an operation is when you go into orbit around the Earth and you're going to leave the Earth's environment and go to another planet. So the countdown is not just the rocket that you're launching. The countdown is made up of all these elements, all the people at the Cape, all the people around the United States and literally around the world is going through a countdown, getting ready for their part, their time, their specific moment.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We passed the 6-minute mark in our countdown for Apollo 11. Now 5 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. Launch Operations Manager Paul Donnelly reports go for launch. Launch Director Rocco Petrone now gives a go. Coming up shortly, that swing arm up at the spacecraft level will come back to its fully retracted position. This should occur at the 5-minute mark in the count. In the meantime, the lunar module telemetry has been powered down. We took a good look at Eagle, and it looks good. The spacecraft test conductor for the lunar module reported that Eagle was go. The swing arm now coming back to its fully retracted position as our countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Skip Chauvin informing the astronauts that the swing arm now coming back. The astronauts will have a few more reports coming up in the countdown. The last business report will be from Neil Armstrong at the 45-second mark in the count when he gives a status on the final alignment of the stabilization and control system. We're now passing the 4-minute, 30-second mark in the countdown. Still go at this time.
I think that the legacy of 11 is the teamwork that was required to to make all that come together and happen. We all worked as a team, but there wasn't a bunch of robots doing this. There was a lot of constructive, creative thought involved in trying to make this happen, and everybody was working for the common project.
We are go for Apollo 11. We'll go on an automatic sequence starting at 3 minutes and 7 seconds.
I think it's probably very difficult for the computer buff today to understand the difference in computers today and the difference in computers then. They were very limited in their capability and did not have anywhere near the capacity or the computer strength or time capabilities associated with what we have today, and they bear no comparison. However, what we did in the 60s, what we accomplished and provided the basis for, is what literally changed the world as we know it.
When I look at the technology that we had, I marvel at its sophistication, at its capabilities. We had a digital autopilot that commanded both the command module and the lunar module to change its attitude to execute the major thrusting maneuvers. I can't imagine things vastly improving that today.
This is the launch operations manager. The launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed. Thank you very much. No, it'll be a good one. CDR, FTC, how do you read me? FTC, okay, Neil, have a good one. You bet.
Launch operations manager Paul Donnelly wished the crew on the launch team's behalf good luck and Godspeed. 3 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We're still go at this time. We'll be coming up on the automatic sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from this time. All still go at this time. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. Firing command coming in now. We are on the automatic sequence. We're approaching the 3-minute mark in the count. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. T-minus 2 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. The members of the launch team here in the control center monitoring a number of what we call red line values. These are tolerances we don't want to go above and below in temperatures and pressures. They're standing by to call out any deviations from our plans. 2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. We're still go on Apollo 11 at this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. 2 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts, the moon at liftoff, will be at a distance of 218,096 miles away. We've just passed the 2-minute mark in the countdown. T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds and counting. Our status board indicates that the oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. We continue to build up pressure in all 3 stages here at the last minute to prepare it for liftoff. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission, the flight to land the first men on the moon.
During the launch phase, the room was full. We were all plugged in listening. You had access to the displays and the voice loops, and so you could really follow what was going on in the mission. It was the place where we wanted to be, everybody.
It was a high mood, and I think everybody was in a good frame of mind and felt like they were ready to do it.
We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back it's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Okay, we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on proper heading. Plus 30 seconds. Roll's complete and the pitch is programming. One Bravo. One Bravo is a abort control mode. Altitude's 2 miles.
Apollo 11 Houston, you're good at 1 minute.
Downrange 1 mile, altitude 4 miles now. Velocity 2,195 feet per second.
Start bottle pressure red line is lit. I don't... Where? Yeah, it don't make a difference. No difference. Okay, let's punch them out. Everything is go, Ralph.
We're through the region of maximum dynamic pressure now.
Yeah, everything looks good here. We're at 1350 on the start bottle.
Set 8 miles downrange, 12 miles high. Velocity 4,000 feet per second.
Stand by for mode 1 Charlie. Mark, mode 1 Charlie.
1 Charlie. Cliff Charlesworth taking a staging status.
This is Houston, you are go for staging.
Inboard cutoff. Inboard engines out.
Come inboard cutoff.
Downrange 35 miles, 30 miles high. Standing by for the outboard engine cut down now.
The liftoff went very smoothly. I felt, in retrospect, that it was very smooth and very gentle. And you're very relieved when that first stage terminates and the second stage ignites and everything is calm and peaceful. The separation of the tower takes place and you're a sightseer. You're along for the ride. You're watching things happen. You're alert for anything that might go wrong, and you kind of marvel at the smoothness of an eventful success.
We got skirt step.
Roger, we confirm skirt step.
Tower's going.
Roger, tower.
Neil Armstrong confirming both the engine skirt separation and the launch escape tower separation.
Yeah, Houston, Apollo 11 and Saturn gave us a magnificent ride. Roger, 11, we'll pass that on, and it certainly looks like you're well on your way now.
The mission continues as the Apollo 11 crew travel between the Earth and the Moon. Real-time Apollo calling Earth tomorrow night at 9:30 on 4.